We'll start off with the next session in a few minutes. Till then, may I please call the panelists over the stage. May I please call Mr. Chandrasekhar Sama Germil, Director, Cloud, FOSI and Control Plus at Data Security Center. Mr. Arindrajit Basu. Mr. Kumar KV. And Mr. Rahul Rathore. I think we are already a few minutes late than our session, so I would be starting off with the next session. The topic of our session is data ownership and sovereignty, what it really means, and how it helps in forming your cloud strategies. So what I believe is the topic for the panel is very apt because post-COVID era, all the IT companies, to be very specific, have devised a mechanism wherein they are wanting to shift from endpoint devices to store their data in cloud. The cloud offers them feasibility, efficiency, scalability in maintaining and protecting their data. But at the same time, they are posed with certain questions, or so to say, some concepts to which they have to adhere to and find solutions according to which they can maintain both these efficiency and scalability and at the same time protect their data from external invasions and prevent data breach for that matter. So to present the concept in a very wider sense, we have an eminent set of panelists with us today who they represent a very well mix of both the service provider, the data centers, as well as the users of cloud environment. And this I believe will give us an insight as to what is this technology all about. What are the concerns that are being raised with regard to this? And how the concepts of data sovereignty, data ownership, data residencies, data localization for that matter, is posing a hindrance or giving them some advantages on adoption of cloud environment for their businesses and enterprises. So I would formally like to introduce our panel before you, who they will give you brief insight on this topic. So first of all, I would like to welcome Mr. Chandrasekhar Sarma Garimil, who he will be representing Control Plus S data center as well as Cloud 4C cloud service provider. Then we have Mr. Arindrajit Basu, who he is a lawyer by training and he is a research fellow with Center for Internet and Society. So he will briefly give us an insight onto these emerging concepts of data sovereignty and data ownership. Then we have Mr. Kumar KV, who is a group CIO and CISO from Narayana Healthcare, who he may give us a brief insight as to what a user of a cloud service provider may face with the use of these technologies, use of these concepts and nuances before it. And then we have Mr. Rahul Rathore, who is Privacy and Data Governance Officer from Vedanta and Hindustan Zinc Limited, who will again give us a brief insight that what the industry and the regulated industries for that matter have problems with these concepts. We will try to delve that we do not only discuss the problems and issues with these concepts, but rather come out with certain suggestions, recommendations for that matter, that are these concepts really true or they are misconceived for the adoption of cloud in present context. So with these opening remarks, I would like to open the house for discussion, and if time permits, we may open the house for further discussions and question answer session, or we can take them further out in the tea. So with this, I would like to ask the very first question from Mr. Arindrajit, that as you are a lawyer by training, I believe that you may give the audience a brief insight as to what are these concepts all about. What is data sovereignty? What is data residency? What is data ownership? Are they one or interchangeable, or they have different meanings attached to it?
First of all, thank you very much, Deepa, and thank you to DSCI for having me at this great summit and this very important panel. And I think we were discussing in the pre-panel as well that the phrase data sovereignty, cyber sovereignty, digital sovereignty is very often used both in policy, political, legal, and technical discourse. And there is no one definition that necessarily everyone agrees on. And that's reflective of the term sovereignty itself. No one historically over the past few centuries has really agreed on one definition of sovereignty. There are various different global legal instruments that do try to define sovereignty, but there isn't really one set definition. But that said, to have a conversation both at this panel and to further policy discourse, we need to set some baselines. So the baseline for sovereignty, even before we come to data sovereignty or digital sovereignty, is that it is the right of all countries or any country to regulate anything that is happening within their territory or to its citizens. That is a very baseline understanding of sovereignty that is relatively non-controversial. So now it became controversial in the 1990s when the internet started growing a little bit, and the pioneers of the internet said that sovereignty or state sovereignty doesn't apply here. The internet should be something that's entirely deregulated. And that was something that continued for 10 years or so in the 1990s to the early 2000s. But really what that led to was a certain set of companies from a certain part of the world becoming very rich and very powerful. And then that's when other countries started pushing back. So right from 2008, China pushed back in its own way, where it imposed content restrictions that could be viewed in China through the Great Firewall. Russia pushed back in the post-2010 with conceptualizing an internet that's disconnected from the rest of the world. And then, of course, India, starting from 2017, both the government and industry players in India pushed back in a slightly different way, where the Indian conception of data sovereignty isn't that data or digital India should be disconnected from the benefits of an interconnected world, but that if actors want to engage with India, then they should respect India's interests and follow Indian laws. And that discourse has been entrenched both in domestic law and policy making, as well as in foreign policy, where whenever India has engaged with the World Trade Organization or with the G20, it has always taken a stance that to not commit to an agreement that would hinder a domestic policy-making space. And I think in the next round, I'll go a little bit more into what exactly are the legal implications of sovereignty. So with that very brief history of this concept aside, the fact that really the understanding of sovereignty or data sovereignty is a pushback against an internet that potentially was unfair for a major part of the world. What are these concepts then? So sovereignty, I defined it as the right of a country to regulate, and that's a broad vision. Within that, there are several concepts that apply legally. So there is data residency, which basically implies, and this is where the title of the panel, data ownership, becomes important. So data residency basically implies that data that is stored within a certain territory or is resident within a certain territory is under the control of the actors, including the laws and the governance frameworks of that territory. And that is basically a synonym for data localization, which is the legal or a legal restriction mandating that data be resident within a particular territory. And then along with that, there are various other requirements to really conceptualize sovereignty, or data sovereignty or cloud sovereignty. So of course, along with data being resident, there are various other laws that need to be complied with, whether it's privacy regulation, security regulation, procurement regulations in terms of what are the actors that you can comply with. So the best way to understand it and to frame sovereignty versus localization versus ownership is that sovereignty is a broad political and legal concept that is used in various different contexts. Residency and localization are the legal implications of those concepts, which we'll discuss throughout the panel. And you have various other aspects of sovereignty, such as general privacy compliance and security compliance, which is the right of a country to regulate. So with that framing, I'll stop and hand over back to Deepa. Thank you.
Thank you, Indrajit, for that brief introduction. So what I understood is that data ownership and data sovereignty are both somewhat related to where a data is being collected and data is being processed. In that context, I think my next question would be to Mr. Chandrasekhar, who is both representing data centers as well as cloud service providers. Sir, in the given context, how do you visualize that, how does the architecture of cloud and its whole structure adhere to these data sovereignty norms, the given architecture of cloud, because I believe that data is not residing in one country, it is being collected from one place, it is getting stored at different places. So how do you basically explain the structure of cloud and its architecture to our audience to understand that what challenges it pose further for adoption of cloud?
Uh, Thank you, Deepa, and thanks for this panel discussion first, to Ranjit, Kumar, and Rahul. Actually, it's a very vast subject, cloud architecture about cloud. But first, as Paul has told, I think he's CEO of VMware, what he has told, the cloud is about how you do computing, but not where you do computing. The basic definition of cloud is that. So, now, after this pandemic, or you take 2 decades before, the large companies were struggling to do the business because it has to go different places, different localities. They were struggling. So when this, I think, late leader who has brought this cloud into this world, where it has given a lot of comfort to everybody, every citizen of the world, because now you take a small company, you could take, see, there is a big company called Sita Travels, small company you take Clear Trip. Sita Travels, it is actually a big company, they were doing a lot of the business there, and they were the pioneers there. And it was very difficult for us to reach them at the time because we are getting the problem because we are not able to get the services because of their busy schedules. Slowly the small companies have come up, like Clear Trip and all. Now they are equivalent to, at the cheaper cost, they are equivalent to do the service of the bigger companies. Because that is very, very important here. With a single dollar, they can do the same service. Why? Because the cloud benefit here is, see, if you take a company like a big company, no, you take a bank like State Bank of India, where they have to abide by all these standards, like ISO 27, 9000, 22,000, whatever standard you take, they have to. And when it comes to a cloud provider, and when he is giving somebody, a cloud provider is giving this service to a small organization, since the cloud provider is already certified in all those standards, he need not be. He has got that benefit. So the cloud has brought a lot of benefits to the smaller companies, medium companies, MSMEs, everybody. So coming to the architecture, even though it's a big subject, but I will just in a nutshell I'll tell. First there will be a client, then internet, then you are connected to the backend. That is, services are there. Then you have got the platforms are there, where the connectivity comes with the network. But again, there are 3 service models and 4 or 5 deployment models are there. So the deployment models, I can say, the public cloud, you would have heard about public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, or community cloud. So public cloud is nothing but which is shared. The tenancy can be shared, the resources are shared. The big companies, they are taking that public cloud. And private cloud, which actually owned by the user himself or the organization. It can be at his premises or a dedicated place at the third place. It's totally it's a little expensive. That is the reason. And the third one is hybrid, which is a mixture of public and private. He will have all the resources from the public, and the security like private will be given to him. That's called hybrid cloud. The multi-cloud, there will be different cloud providers come into the effect, and they will serve. That's called multi-cloud. A community cloud, it's nothing but a community like SAP you take. It's a community. For all his customers he'll serve. So that is called a community cloud. So now when we come back to the service models, that is called infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. These three, a lot of are there, but these three are prominently, we call them as service models in cloud. So if you take, they have got 9 services in this. That is application, data, runtime, middleware, then OS, virtualization, storage, servers, storage, and network. So some of them up to network to virtualization, it comes under infrastructure as a service. So where all these data centers, we give that service to all the clients wherever they want, all organizations. The next level is platform as a service, where we'll add the OS and the middleware. Like you are now all platform as a service, all the players like the bankers and all, they'll come, or the AWS and these people, all these multinationals, they'll come there. And this software as a service. Nowadays, everybody is using here, the Dropbox or Gmail, whatever it is there, they're all software as a service. So all these, the responsibilities comes only once the service is completed here, where the services are there. The above that, it is the responsibility of the client. Now it is for, if you take infrastructure as a service, up to the virtualization, the responsibility of the cloud service provider. The above all is the client's responsibility. Same way, up to the middleware, it is the responsibility of the cloud service provider, rest is client. Here, the software as a service, everything is the responsibility of the cloud service provider. Only you will have a thin client at your place and you can work on that. So taking all these things, and actually cloud works on 5 pillars, that is called CROPS. That is cost effectiveness, because the benefit of cloud is cost effectiveness, because everybody is reachable in this cloud. Then R is for reliability, where the reliability is more in cloud because people are believing it, they are doing on that. Then operational efficiency you'll get, whereas the cloud in the one of the pillars it is there, and performance evaluation, and finally security. On these lines, the cloud architecture works.
Thank you, Mr. Chandrasekhar, for that brief introduction of cloud and its architecture. So I believe when software as a service I'm using as a user of the cloud, in that context, I would like to ask from Mr. Kumar or from Mr. Rahul, like both of them can answer simultaneously, that when it is a thing wherein your data is being stored in a cloud, whose is this responsibility to ensure that data is, whose control is there over the data? Is it the cloud service provider or the provider of that data to the cloud? Like, how do you ensure control over your data? Because what the concept we are discussing is all about control. Who has the control over that data?
So, so in terms of who has control of data, it is, we have to understand, Chandrasekhar articulated about the shared responsibility model. Across the infrastructure service, platform as service, and software as service. Now, based on the service that you actually take, and based on the provider that you actually choose, right? I think even before all that, you will have to ensure that if you're going to place your mission critical data, you have to ensure that you read through the entire agreement and understand what do they mean by data ownership, who owns the data, at which type of service they are providing, and where does their responsibility end and where the customer responsibility basically starts. So it's basically a shared responsibility model. And when we talk about data, whatever data that you actually push in terms of in terms of your application, the data is basically owned by the customer. But you will also have to understand through the agreement as, what are the rights and privileges they will actually have from a backend standpoint, how they basically have, multiple checks and balances in place to ensure that that data doesn't get exfiltrated, right? So we will have to ensure that as customers, we'll have to read through the agreement, understand, and then make a very informed decision.
Extending your answer further, like I have a different question. Like considering that you deal with a very critical set of data, that is the healthcare data. So you are, and then you have adopted to the cloud architecture. So first question what I pose is this a public cloud or a private cloud? And given the sensitivity of data that you pose, that is a healthcare data, who actually has the ownership of that data? Is the patient consumer or the hospital consumer of the cloud? So how do you ensure sovereignty there for that matter?
So there are multiple questions in this. So in terms of the platform that we are in, we are aligned with one of the global cloud platform providers who are based out of India. And in terms of, we've ensured that our mission critical applications which are actually there, and we don't run any data centers. All our mission critical applications or all other business applications are completely hosted over there. And how we basically went through this entire journey is, we handle a lot of SPDI, right? Which means that with all the upcoming PDP bill or DPDP bill or whatever bill that we call, in whatever name, we will be subjected to an N number of controls along with our brothers and sisters from the BFSI field, right? Because they are already subjected to a number of controls. So at what we have done in terms of, before porting all this data onto cloud, we've ensured that we've had a proper information lifecycle management strategy where we have understood what are all the data that we actually have, what are all the solutions we have, how each of these solutions or application talk to each other, what is the flow of data, what is sensitive, identifiable sensitive information, what is personal identifiable information, and then based on that, did the data classification, what is confidential, what is sensitive, what is public, what is internal. So we need to have that line of sight. And once we did this, what we also did was do a thorough risk assessment of from creation, storage, archive, purging, all these areas. How does what is the risk involved in all this? What are the various controls that are actually there? And how does the information risk basically tie to the enterprise risk? Because enterprise risk depends on the business or the business process, where you do the business, the customers that are there, what kind of service that you actually provide. So after doing all this, then we basically, looked at, how do we basically place this data, right? Then we looked at the legal and regulatory framework that is actually there. What are, is there something there in the Information Technology Amendment Act of 2011? What are the type of agreement are we given? Are we given a click and wrap agreement or an enterprise agreement? Does the cloud service provider replicate the data to another region? Or do we have the ability to place our data within the India borders? Then we understand the security and compliance posture of the cloud service provider and basically understand what all they actually commit as per the structure. And then once we read through all this and including the shared responsibility model, their controls and everything, we then compare this with their auditor's report. So whatever they have committed to the outside world and how they have been audited by a third party, now we compare that, we will understand whether they walk the talk or not, right? Now, based on that, we've ensured that we have then understood what the gaps are or what are the controls that we have to fill in from a shared responsibility model standpoint, and then went ahead and placed the data. And this ensures that, and whatever data that let us say if you have encrypted the data, right? An example is an encryption. We ensure that we have complete control over the encryption keys, so that the CSP doesn't hold the keys to the encryption, but we hold the keys to the encryption. We ensure that there is periodic rotation of keys that actually happen. So by this, we ensure that there is, the data ownership, rests with us. Now, but when you look at an actual sense from a privacy standpoint, the ultimate data owner, from a healthcare standpoint is the patient. We are just guardians or the custodians of data, or in the right term, we are data fiduciaries that are there, right? So all we have to do is, the patient basically pumps in records in terms of X-rays, CT, MRIs, or blood tests, or prescriptions, or whatever it is, and it is our duty when they basically pump in their data through consultations done it from our hospital or even from external records, if they upload it to our platform, we ensure that reasonable security and privacy measures are actually put in to guard that data. So that's what we actually do.
To add few lines in what Kumar said is like, yes, the ultimate owner of data will be the patient or the end user only, but the one who decide purpose and means of data will be the data control, right?
Correct. So in terms of the use limitation, in terms of the purpose limitation, right? So if I'm providing a, let us say an outpatient service, then do I collect the right data, right? So in terms of collection limitation, am I collecting, so in the registration field, am I asking all the right set of data from a demographic standpoint? Let us say if I ask you a PAN number, is that going to be relevant? I think there is some problem with the mic. So let us say if I ask a PAN number or something like that, then will that, is that relevant, considering the context of the service? And if I basically collect that data, and let us say if I want to, if I'm doing a campaign, for pharmacy or selling medicines, then have I got the right consent to use that data for this particular marketing campaign that I'm actually doing? So like use limitation, collection limitation. So we have to ensure that the data is collected for the right intent or the intended objectives, and then we ensure that we put it to good use, based on the consent that we have received from the patient.
Added to that, actually, in US, everywhere, the health data is very, very important for them. It is personal, for the patient identified information is there. It's called where, which is certified, actually, for certification comes in that, that is HIPAA. It's called Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, where patient's data, because as an auditor, I'm there in this auditing field from the last 30 years. As an IT auditor, I worked, and I visited about 38 countries in the world. I've done a lot of hospital industry also. I've audited. So I used to verify these data. That's the reason that's important.
So basically, I can say that the ownership and control over data is belong to the intention. Basically, with what intention a data is being collected. Rahul, like I would like to ask you that if I consider mining industry is a very sort of uh, like industry which is not so digital in nature. For that, it's what I believe. And now you being shifted to a digital infrastructure, adopting to cloud. So do you face any challenges while complying to these requirements of localization, sovereignty for that matter?
Right. So most of the people thinks like in manufacturing, mining, the smelting business have two side of the business. One is the IT side and one is the OT side, right? But under this big umbrella, in IT itself, we have 2 to 3 verticals. One is the growth side of the business, which is digitization. And you rightly said like there are ample of opportunity where we can put lot of tools, technology, processes to digitize the things, and we can actually run the growth side of business. And the other IT side is the run side of the business, where the CIOs are take care of this business, and we call sometimes as a keeping the lights on business, right? And and this is the thing where this considers the operational overhead things, where people are busy in taking backups, people are busy in compliance, physical security controls. Most of the time we are dealing with the incidents with network teams and all. So this is a classic example where the cloud adoption journey works, where the CIO and management want to shift this operational overhead to somebody else, right? And that's what we as a mining company started. We even adopted our cloud journey, and we moved most of our cloud servers on cloud. And yes, we are comfortable, and it's good for us.
I think if I'm audible like this, I would continue because mic has some problem. Identity is like what I read and what I believe is that when you are complying with these concepts, ownership, sovereignty, localization, being a data center, or for that matter, user of a cloud service provider, you are bound to adhere to number of laws governing data localization. Say a cloud service provider is operating in India but has a data center located in US. So it has a dual responsibility of complying with both the US laws, Indian laws, and for the laws of the country where it was incorporated. So do you think that it actually poses a challenge? What are the regulatory and legal hurdles that a CSP may pose, or what are the opportunities for that matter with a law legal standpoint that may opportune this cloud service and its adoption in the country? And to put it in other words, do you also feel that the concept of sovereignty, ownership, is a misconceived one and it's being it's creating a problem in the way it is being interpreted today? Because as far as I know, sovereignty as a concept has always been there from the time a state was incorporated. So how do you see it is playing out in digital world? So regulation, rules, how it is actually playing out?
Thank you. Great. I think the mic is sort of
I
working.
believe we can continue without using the
Without
mic
the
if,
mic.
if we are audible.
Okay, am I audible? Great, thank you. So, I think great questions, and the observation you made at the beginning of your question, basically stating that the internet architecture works in such a fashion that this is a reality, right? That you are incorporated in one country, you are servicing another country, and your data center may be located in a third country. So then, automatically, that means that there's a whole field of what is known as private international law or conflict of laws that is supposed to deal with the situation where there is a conflict of jurisdiction. So as I said in the beginning, the first step towards a certain jurisdiction is whose territory has first cleared. But obviously, for the entity that is providing the service, or the cloud service provider, it's difficult to be trapped in this conflict of law situation where every single data transfer is subject to a negotiation. And therefore, what we are possibly increasingly moving towards are smoother data sharing agreements between what has been used recently in the Indian context as trusted geography. So there have been attempts at data sharing agreements that the US, for example, has entered through what is known as the Cloud Act with certain countries, including the UK, where if a country needs data, there needs to be free flow of data, then that will be automatically enabled by that data sharing agreement. So that is in the context of other countries ensuring that there is a smooth flow of data to India. Of course, that would mean that then the Indian legal framework would need to be, to use the GDPR phrase, adequate in terms of protection it gives to consumers, adequate to the laws of the EU. Thank you. So that is from that end. But and then from the other end also, the most recent development in India has, of course, as was being referred to, is the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, and this is the fourth iteration of the bill that has been there since 2018, and this is the one that is potentially the most pro kind of free flow of data, but with a very strong caveat that there will only be data sharing agreements negotiated with trusted geographies or notified countries. So there will be a whitelisting process where India will negotiate with like-minded countries that share interests to have data sharing agreements. But again, there is that uncertainty, because for a service provider or even for a country or a company that's looking to negotiate with India, there needs to be maybe some more clarity on what exactly the points of negotiation would be, what exactly are the requirements, both legal and political, that a country would need to comply with to start off through this process. The indication has been that a lot of it will be done through ongoing trade agreements as well, where into bilateral free trade agreements, data sharing clause will be incorporated, as has been done with the UAE. So in response to your first question, yes, that is definitely a challenge where the architecture of the internet leads to a situation of conflict of laws, but that can be sorted out through political negotiation that is backed by a legal data sharing agreement, and that is a model that's already being followed by the US and EU, and with India's negotiating prowess, I'm sure that India will also be one of the partners that are part of data sharing agreements that are in line with India's own strategic interest. Because the challenge is not just for service providers, but even for law enforcement agencies. That is one of the things that has been highlighted regularly by India, that if a crime is committed in Bengaluru, the victim is in Bengaluru, but the data is located somewhere in Virginia, then you have to comply with US laws to get that data. And that takes anywhere between 12 to 18 months, which is obviously not sustainable. So these challenges are there, but it can be sorted out through legally negotiated agreements. To quickly respond to your second question on whether sovereignty is a misnomer, I don't think so. I think that sovereignty, we can't do away with the fact that global governance is contingent on states, and we need states and governments to create some sort of order and protect citizens and regulate and ensure security and human rights and so on. So we can't do away with the state. I think that is not something that can happen. What needs to happen, and by all indications, the Indian foreign policy establishment, as well as the laws that are being developed within India, is trying to strike a balance between ensuring that sovereign interests are captured, that India's security, India's stance, India's constitutional rights, India's economic interests, the fact that the data is useful for several countries to develop, those are safeguarded, but balanced with the fact that we are living, despite concerns of deglobalization and so on, still living in a world that is fairly interconnected and needs agreements with various companies and countries in other parts of the world, so long as they are, in the words of the government itself, trusted geographies that would not undermine India's interests. So sovereignty is definitely a thing, but that needs to be balanced with the benefits of global commerce and globalization that comes with the internet. I'll quickly end there because there are a range of laws in India that do this fairly well. I referred to one of them, which is the bill that is, the draft bill that is in the works, but there are several other laws that try to strike this balance, and it will be really interesting to see how companies and countries further the provisions of these laws to strike what is a legitimate balance between two very important competing interests.
Thank you, Arundaji, for that beautiful insight. Extending your answer further to another question to Mr. Chandrasekhar and Mr. Rahul. As a provider of the service, data centers provider and a cloud service provider, in absence of any specific legislation dealing with privacy in India, or for that matter sovereignty in India, what are the rules and regulations that you comply to while giving your services? And Rahul, what are the laws that you refer to while using such a services in Indian context? And does not having a particular legislation dealing with this aspect pose any challenges in using and providing the services of cloud? So,
Challenges, yes. I can say yes and I can say no also, because still the legislation, the country does not properly come for us. Only because still it is in the discussion stage and it's completed, but still it has to come up. But the bodies like Reserve Bank of India for bankers, insurance, health, their own laws, their own statutory, already the recommendation, the regulations have come. If you take Reserve Bank of India guidelines, all the banks, they are supposed to keep their data wherever it is geographically, wherever it is there, it should be there. At least one copy should be kept in this country. So that now that already it has come from Reserve Bank of India, they are mandated. And as far as these cloud service providers are concerned, there was an issue that is 3-4 years back we were having, because those people, they don't have their footing in this wherever they want. In their friendly countries only, they were having that. But now, maximum, all of them, they have got their own data centers in the places where they want to do business. So that is the reason now that slowly the sovereignty for cloud service providers minimized. But still, the data what we are talking today, I think by 2025, the data will be about 149 gigabytes. You know, the gigabytes means 1 byte. That is 1 into 21 plus 21 zeros you have to put. So that will be the data it will be consumed by people. So for that, you just can understand how much control, how much these regulations have to work.
Yeah. So, like how we observe as a cloud like client or the right. So we make our decisions, and whenever we talk to cloud service provider, we observe so many things in past, and based on that observation and events, we talk, right. So I start with year 2019 when in G20 summit Osaka, India refused to sign that the bill Osaka Treaty, right? So what we understand, like India will not going to be a free flow or the free flow digital data economy type of thing. There will be short data localization and stringent localization, right? So we observe from that time, or at least till that time, we don't have any data localization things or that, but still the narrative has built up, right? So narrative is there. Even we, our CEOs, the leadership, the CISOs and IT people are in talking in terms of like where my data reside, right? They are in like talking in terms of data localization, whether it's bill or not, it's act or not. But yes, we are talking in terms of data localization. The other part, lots of data center business growing in India. Even recently, 4 5 months back, one of our data center, Indian data center, got tier 4 rating. It means data center business is growing, and going forward, India will be a data center hub. So what it means? It means government definitely will be pushing for data localization, at least one copy in India. So these events, these observations are a basis where we are talking when whenever we adopting cloud, right? We asking cloud partner, okay, our data must be in our country within our boundary first of all, and whenever any new law come with reference to India, you need to abide that law. That's what we are expecting right now from cloud service providers.
Arindrajit, this brings me to you. Like, do you also feel that government is pushing towards data localization? Because when I read the new draft of the bill, it is like giving flexibility with regard to data transfers. So, how do you visualize the concept of data transfers as given in the recent bill with the concepts which we are discussing today, especially in the context of cloud?
Thank you. I'll be very quick with this response because I think the responses by Rahul before especially were very insightful. So in terms of India's data localization stance, there are already some laws that have been referred to that mandate localization, and they have been enforced pretty strictly. So for example, the RBI directive, which mandates local storage, and you can only take it out for 24 hours for processing and then it has to be brought back. That's been there since 2018. And any payments company, including card companies that did not submit an audit report stating that they have complied with this requirement, were banned from issuing new cards. That happened last year. MasterCard, American Express were included in this list. Visa had complied. So that kind of example is definitely there. And but I believe now that those compliance bottlenecks have been sorted out. So that law is there. There are various other sectoral laws in the insurance sector that mandate localization already. Now with the personal data protection bill, this is above and beyond these sectoral laws. The question was whether there would be another localization mandate for all personal data. And there have been various iterations of this bill. So the first iteration in 2018 from the Shri Krishna committee mandated a mirroring requirement that if there is one copy stored abroad, there will need to be one copy also stored in India. The version that was tabled in 2019, that was basically didn't have the mirroring requirement, but it said that certain kinds of data, so sensitive data and what was defined as critical data, would need to be stored in India. And now finally, after several years of consultation, we have a situation where the data localization provision itself will be subjected to a negotiation. So in the sense that there is, by default, there is no restriction. But if data is flowing to a certain geography, then the terms used in the bill is that it has to be a certain notified country where it will follow a whitelisting process where if, say, I'm just saying a country off the top of my head, say Australia is one country that India has a positive a security relationship with, positive economic relationship with. It has an existing trade agreement that doesn't have a data provision yet. If that relationship goes forward, then India will negotiate Australia, will notify Australia and several other countries as a whitelisted country to which there are no restrictions in data free flow. So I think India's stance on data localization is simply that there are certain sectors that are too critical to have data being transferred abroad with no particular restrictions, but on personal data itself, there are no, which is not within these critical sectors, there are no overarching regulations, but there will need to be a negotiation as per section 17 of the bill to figure out what are the trusted geographies. So does that answer the question?
But isn't that there is a hard localization for critical data, and then there is a soft localization for the sensitive data? Is that what the bill, the new bill says?
Not the current one.
So that's been done away with.
That's been
That
done
was the
away with.
2019 version, and now that's been done away with. Now it's a very simple provision that if certain countries are notified, so if, say, again, Australia, New Zealand, and 50 other countries are notified, there are no restrictions whatsoever in section 17 of this bill. So that is the 2019 version. But of course, let us see what is, as Sir was saying, wait for come in and be tabled and so on. But yeah.
Yeah, we are left with a very few minutes, so I would like quickly ask a question, and whoever is comfortable answering. Like, considering criticality of healthcare data and the cloud architecture that Sir Chandrasekhar explained, like in a multi-tenancy cloud environment for that matter, whose responsibility is to ensure control and security of my data stored in that multi-tenancy cloud architecture environment?
No, I think I answered in the first, I think
Yeah.
long story short. Depends on the nature of service that you actually take, whether it's infrastructure, platform, or software as a service. It's a shared responsibility model. If it is an infrastructure, then whatever data that you store, you have to ensure that adequate controls are actually put in by the enterprise to ensure that the data ownership rests with them and not with the cloud service provider. And through risk assessments to understanding their reports and understanding how they implement security and compliance, you can have a reasonable assurance. And also reading the auditor's report, you'll have a reasonable assurance to ensure that they don't have access to the enterprise's data.
Basically, it's a part of your contractual agreements
Yeah.
which you enter with
Yeah,
your cloud service
yeah,
provider.
provided enterprises read the contract and sign it.
I want to add in here irrespective of what deployment model or what service model we select, what I feel like the responsibility of data security and privacy lies with the principal, like we only, right? We
Data fiduciary.
ultimately we will be
Yeah.
the responsible person for security and privacy of data. And to add in what Arinjit said from a localization point of view, so any point of time when 10 or 15 countries notified for data localization, still we will be in dilemma that whether we should go with these countries or not. On like after few years or few months, if government said, okay, now this is not the friendly nation and we'll like notified, okay, we cannot transfer some of the data to these countries, then what we will do? So still in this dilemma, we will go with data localization and we'll demand cloud service provider, okay, keep my data in our country.
Yeah, like rightfully, until and unless we have clarity on that, like which are the trusted nations and what are the criteria of determination of the trusted nations. This brings me to the last question of the session. Like, I would like to ask you, Mr. Chandrasekhar, like, we have discussed the laws, we have discussed the issues. Do you think that the industry, as a cloud service provider industry and the data center industry, is ready to embrace the legal and regulatory changes hovering across these concepts? Or do we need some readiness for it?
Yeah, it's a good question. As data center industry, actually data center, we call it as four parts, that is civil, mechanical, power, electrical and electronics. Each and every area you are supposed to have regulatory and you have to abide by the laws. Now, here the benefit actually as data center, the sustainability is very, very important. Because everywhere we are talking about green power and everybody wants carbon credits. as control is data centers, this is the only data center which has got largest, that is 1.3 megawatts of solar power. Our, our Mumbai data center has got, it is generating it. So in the world now, all the major data centers in the world, they are consuming 1% of terawatts per hour. They are the total consumption of, out of total consumption of power as on date. But they are expecting by 2030, it will be 1,100 terawatts of power. So that much is required. So for which I think people are thinking about green data, green power. If you take European countries or those countries where US you take, they don't have sunlight at all. So that is the advantage we have got here, the Asian nations, where we can have this more and more solar plants. And we are having a plan in our own data center. We are having a plan of 200 megawatts in coming days. Already we are ready with 50 megawatts, and which is going to start within 9 to 12 months. So with that, we will get a lot of solar power to our, because we will have our own power, that is solar power. So this is about sustainability. Again, other regulations already recently, the data center policy in 2020 it has come. It's a wonderful policy where they are supporting all the data centers. They are directing the governments, the local governments, to have uninterrupted power, the data centers. And they are asking MITI to be in touch with the TRI to give more and more fiber, that's totally connectivity to all the places. And they are giving a national building code to all the data centers now. And they want to make it as a separate economic zone, and so that they want to give support to all the data centers. And they wanted to have a separate, I think, curriculum in all the universities where these skills, as how, what all the aspects of data center has to be covered in the education also. So there is a lot of support is there from the government now. I think this will give a lot of benefit, a lot of data centers we may get. Because a lot of big players are coming now in our country now. Because they think that they are safe. Because we have got 3 proper seasons. No other countries in the world, they have it. Have winter, summer and rainy season, which is very, very important for their needs. That is the reason they wanted to come here, and they want to have, already the biggies have come and they are already establishing their data centers. So regulations are there, and for everything we have to abide by that for data centers. And these data centers are being supported by the government, and whichever regulations, what I said about the civil, mechanical, electrical and electronics, if these 4 are not properly satisfied with the data center ownership, it will be a difficult part for them.
Thank you, Mr. Chandrasekhar, for such beautiful insight. So my key takeaways from this session is that data ownership and sovereignty is not a misnomer, but a critical concept in today's time, where we need to have control over our data, not only as a citizen, but also as a nation. And for that, data centers and cloud service providers are playing a pivotal role, and the support which Mr. Chandrasekhar told us about that data centers are getting in the country, it supports the idea that we as a country are planning to have control over data, but not compromising with the efficiencies that these new technologies are providing us. So with these closing remarks, I close the session for now, and I would like to request all my panelists to please stand up so that we can share a memento from our side, and thank you for the beautiful insights that we had today. Thank you so much.